Welcome to the Happy in the Mess podcast. We are your hosts, Marlena, Sherry, and Matthew. We are therapists and coaches, and we want to share our own stories with you, as well as the wisdom, insights, and tips we've learned along the way. Thanks for tuning in to this episode.
Welcome back to Happy in the Mess. We are close to wrapping up our first season this year that we started this podcast, and I am hosting today. My name is Marlena Del Hierro, and I am a dating and relationship coach. And today we have two amazing coaches with us. Today we've got Matthew Morgan, the Misfit coach, who also works with people who are also burned out in particular, and Sherry Timko, who is our primo relationship coach and is going into sex therapy and will have loads and loads to share with us regarding that. Check her out on Facebook too. She just started a group for that. You can find more details by contacting her. Listen at the end of the episode to hear our new offerings as well. And today we are talking about grief and sadness during the holidays. And if you didn't catch our episode 4 on holiday dread, it would be worth a listen because I know that the holidays are challenging for a lot of us. And we're going to discuss today what you can do about that, what that looks like and potential solutions and just how to, like our title suggests, still be happy in that mess or find some feelings of respite and relief even amongst, this time of the year, which is hard for a lot of people too, because the sun is not out as often. It's hard to get that vitamin D. It's uncomfortable to be outside. We had the shortest day of the year. We had the solstice yesterday and what's also referred to as Blue Christmas. So there's just a lot of things going on environmentally as well as emotionally and with family that could be affecting how you feel. So to get started, Matthew, tell us more about what it's like during the holidays when you've lost a loved one, since I know you have some experience with that.
I do actually, and I appreciate you asking. It's definitely not easy. This was going into counseling. You have a certain framework of grief, and when you get to apply that in your own life, things change very drastically. And so the quick version in 2020, Christmas Eve, we went to our church service and attended it. Beautiful, great Ohio blizzard afterwards. So we're white knuckling it all the way home, get home, and we get a call that my mother, who has been fighting cancer for about the last 16 years, was not doing well. And so we had to drive to pick up my brother because he's visually impaired and not able to. And we wanted to make sure he was able to get over and spend some time. And my sister had been there earlier that day. And so Christmas Eve of 2020, we spent sitting by her bedside and saying what could be the goodbye. We weren't sure. We just knew that things were pretty imminent. And woke up Christmas Eve or Christmas Day to a call from my mother's wife, who let us know that she had passed. And just a mind-numbing Christmas. There's just no way to really describe the emotions that were there. So the three of us kids who've been just kind of by our side, my wife, my son, we just got together and hung out. It was the most anti-Christmas Christmas that we had. And there's so many weird things, and we can jump into this a little bit later. I don't know how much detail we want to roll into, but I mean, things like, first of all, what do you buy for somebody who's in the end of life? And then the one that nobody had prepared me for was, what do you do when you take their presents back? And I remember, and I have to apologize to Hobby Lobby because I'm standing there in the front part of it and trying to return my mother's gift because there was no sense in keeping it. And I, didn't know what to do. So I'm there, and then all of a sudden the emotions just hit and, so I think, and I know I'm not alone. I know there are other people who have lost significant others, and we don't get to choose when somebody passes from the world. And how we handle it, I always tell people, how we handle it is how we handle it. There's no shoulds. It's really just kind of being in the moment and letting those emotions happen. The one thing I always tell people too, and it came true, was you also want to watch the first holiday is tough. The second holiday is probably equal. Some people say more, some people say slightly less, but the second holiday without a loved one that's when things really get real. And it's just like, wow. So I always want to warn people when I'm working with them that grief will, I mean, it's a wave. You'll pop out of the ocean and it's going to give you that nasal enema that you just really didn't want. So, I think this is a great episode to discuss what happens when things fall apart and what we do together. And I think you're both fantastic people to be here with for that.
We're so sorry for your loss.
All
That
right.
is a really hard story. I lost my dad, not at the holidays, but in May, um, a few years before that, 2018, I think is the year. And what I remember most about that time period, and even if I think about it now, is the like hole in the fabric of life. Like there was
Mhm.
just someone missing a hole in it. And I know we have a lot of people on this earth, but it just felt very strongly like there was someone who was supposed to be here and wasn't. And that just, like I said, I can even still feel that now.
Mm.
Yes, as both of you talk, I'm feeling very emotional. Yeah, we lost our last surviving grandparent over the holidays right after the new year when we were visiting Mexico and he was visiting with us. And, to have a grandparent pass away, not only when you're visiting another country, which actually worked out because that was where the majority of the family was anyway, but his son, my uncle, had to fly in from Africa. And it's like they hold on just long enough sometimes to say goodbye to the last relative, the last person. It's a kind of strange phenomenon. It's like, and as soon, like shortly after my uncle showed up, he passed. And it was like he was just waiting, just waiting. But it's still hard. And every year it becomes difficult. Even though it's been many years for both of you, it sounds like it's
Mhm.
still very fresh, or it can feel that way.
Okay, so this is a little bit aside from the holidays, but I think it's really important to kind of bring into this. I was with my father when he passed, and I've talked with people who were with a loved one when they passed, and that piece of it can be really troubling to carry with you. And so the holidays kind of brings all that stuff back
Mhm.
up, but some people have almost a PTSD sort of reaction to that passing. I mean, in the movies, you see like the wind blows in and they turn around and that person is gone, or there's that peaceful, like relaxing, but that isn't always how that passing happens. And so I think a lot of people, when they get to the holidays, there's memories that are really troubling about that experience also get kicked up.
Mhm.
It requires definitely a special person. I'm always amazed at our hospice doctors and nurses that do this on a regular basis. And even the night we were sitting with my mom and them being able to be there, we lost my father-in-law the following year on Father's Day. So my family has terrible. So I'm like, not that they choose it, but I'm like, of all days, come on. And it was again a very similar approach. It's not, it was not pretty sitting by the bedside at the end of life. And it requires very much a mindful approach and being able to be present. And there's a lot of really just ugliness or discomfort of what happens. Um, my father-in-law, we sat and fixed engines with him through the last week of his life, roughly, sitting in his hospice bed, the hospital bed. He just was very convinced that he was working on mechanics, and we would just entertain that because that was all you can do at that point. And that's again not what you see in the movies. So
Mhm. No, it can be
yeah.
very, very traumatic. I mean, like you
Mhm.
said, being witness to death. And I do think it's kind of almost like a calling for some, like, and there are death doulas. I have a friend who,
Mhm.
moving into that as sort of a calling and a career, to be with people as they pass. But it can be feel very traumatic to witness that. I think part of us are shielded from death, and that's a whole other conversation. Um, I think it's maybe more common in other cultures where we don't sterilize death so much. And it's more of I don't want to say it's a community witnessing, but it's more of a ingrained in sort of the life cycle. Um, so what would you two recommend for those who have, whether it's been a death or some other kind of traumatic memory that whether you're consciously remembering or not, you just begin to feel sad. Like, is it advised to remember that person who's passed or recall the incident, or is it better to just create new traditions and move on? What would you say is a good way of coping?
So, grief is very personal and it's something that you have to experience. So, I don't know that there is a set of rules of what you should do when you hit that holiday. There's definitely like sitting with and listening to yourself and being present for the things that you can be present for. There's
Mhm.
also allowing yourself to break free from those traditions and maybe start something new, or maybe just take the year off where you're like, I'm just not up to doing this. But really, it feels very personal in terms of what are those things that you specifically should do. So mostly listening and being gentle with yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree wholeheartedly. I love that concept of that there's a hole in the fabric. Um, and there's any number of ways to patch a hole. You can fill it with something, you can move around and move it to a place that's not as obvious. It will still be there no matter how we treat it. Um, and I work a lot with the shoulds when it comes to this, because there is no should. Um, and I think even with people, it varies. It can vary with the holiday itself. It can vary during other times, and being flexible and just trying different things. If it hurts too much thinking of a person, it's okay at some point to put those things away and put them, the reminders someplace safe. It's okay to try something new, be at a different place for a holiday. Um, also it's okay to meet and still continue on. And I know some people will use an empty chair, to kind of represent that. I know that was our Thanksgiving experience. Was mom got the empty chair, and and maybe that's one of the important things here too, is because you're dealing with an individual grief. But I think when you do this, a lot of times there's also a collective grief, a family grief, which has been my experience with my siblings. All three of us had very dramatically different relationships with our mother, and our ways of handling grief were all very different. And again, all valid, but sometimes it doesn't always feel that way. So there was a lot of communication that had to happen, and flexibility to try to work with the ones that needed certain things at certain times.
That's a really good point. I like how you brought up, Matthew, kind of how people experience their own grief differently, even if it's with the same person,
Mhm.
and to allow some grace. I have clients who beat themselves up because they're not reacting like their sibling when someone died. And the sibling's mad because they're not reacting the way they think they should be reacting. And it's like everyone gets to react however they need to react. And
Mhm.
because some of it's uncontrollable. Like,
Yeah.
and it comes and goes like a wave, like you said, and it's not linear. Those 5 stages of grief of denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, acceptance, they don't go in that order. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Everywhere.
yeah.
We I
And
I
those
was
go ahead.
good. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say those, I mean, it's not uncommon either just to experience those 5 stages of grief for other things around the holidays too. You may feel really angry and you may take it out on, or you may feel
Mm,
very sad, or pretending like Christmas is not happening, and just, I mean, those kinds of things can show up regardless.
mm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I I wish I had shared or saved this, um, following following my mother's passing. I was doing a workout, and this was probably 6 months later, and I had a heart monitor on, and the workout had a the theme was in particular something that was very important to my mother, but also something that I found to be very triggering for my memories and some of the things that we had gone through. Um, and I very distinctly, and it's funny because you can watch it on my heart rate, where my heart's going up during the workout, and then like that sadness hit, and that actually, even though I was progressing the workout and still trying to push through, my heart rate went down a little bit. And then there was a point at which I entered into the anger point of grief, and it went from low to that red level where they're like, maybe you want to sit down for a little bit. Um, and I looked at it later, and you know, I was a wreck. I just had to emote and get everything out. And I looked, I was like, oh, there's grief, you know, and it's all those things. And I got to see the body reacting to it in that way, which was a very curious experience to look at it from the outside. But it's, again, it's all valid. It's all part of that process.
It's fascinating that you could see it being tracked with your heart rate monitor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
The experience
absolutely.
of it's real.
So
It's actually things are
it's real.
happening at a molecular level in the body when
Mm-hmm.
you're grieving.
Yes.
Right.
So what would you all say to the expectations perhaps that others have on us, and how do we broach those conversations when people are wanting you to participate in a certain event or tradition or do something, and you're just not feeling it and it's hard to pretend, and how do you get through that?
Yeah, I think this is bigger than just grief when you talk
Mhm.
about expectations. It isn't just, well, the expectations are layered. They're your own expectations, they're the expectations of your family, your kids, and your parents, and all the
Mhm.
relatives. It's also the expectations of the season of life that you're in. I know that when people have little kids, the expectation to make that shiny and
Magical.
exciting and
Yeah.
magical. Yes. Like that's a real thing. That expectation feels like a huge weight. And then there's these greater expectations of what the holidays are supposed to mean from kind of a cultural or
Mhm.
societal level. So there are a lot of places where those expectations can be missed or not met.
Mhm.
So it's almost like you can't go through the holidays and have the expectations get met. Like, that would be the first thing. It's like just accepting, like, this is gonna happen the way it's gonna happen, and that's okay.
Mm. It's almost like expecting disappointment, Sherry. I know you didn't go so far as to say it, but you should just be like, you know what? It's probably not going to go the way I want it to. So, like, let's roll with the punches.
Well, how often are we, like, in the middle of a family gathering and we look around and we're like, "Why are we here?" Like, are we, like, actually having this magical moment, or are we really connecting? And, okay, so maybe
That's
I'll just,
hilarious.
like, maybe take a little ownership of that sometimes I do that. But, sometimes family gets together and they can be together but still not connect,
Oh, yeah.
and it stays very superficial,
Yeah.
and that can feel very alone, very lonely.
Mm. I'm glad you pointed that out because I do think there's this cultural, perhaps familiar expectation that we're going to get together in the holidays and we're going to look and feel a certain way, like they show on the holiday greeting cards or on the Hallmark movies. And you get there, and really, it's like all the other times that you visit. If you weren't having closeness and intimacy at other times of the year, what what makes you think it's going to be different on this one? But there is this expectation that perhaps it might be. And often, sometimes it's not. I don't want to say often. I want to say, but history is a good indicator of how the holiday might go.
So one of the
Yeah.
things that you can do is go in, all right, so not expecting disappointment, but going in with an expectation. Like, one of my little tricks is to try and have a personal conversation with every person that's there.
I like
And
that idea.
so
Hmm.
that really meets my expectation of wanting to connect with people. And I don't always get to everybody, or I don't get beyond maybe a very surface conversation with everybody, but there is that intention that I'm setting for myself.
Mm. I like that because that's something you can actually control. You can control your own behavior and actions and like effort instead of thinking like, I want my mother to be this way and I don't want my dad to ask me about that, or I hope my child doesn't do this, which is completely out of your control and setting yourself up big time for disappointment.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. The I was playing the Norman Rockwell effect, right? It was, we expect everything to be this little piece of perfect Americana, and
Mhm.
paintings look very different when they're done in real time. And
Mhm.
I think, and that's for me again, a lot of times it's just embracing what it is, um, and sometimes it's a matter of controlling what Sherry is saying. You control yourself, right?
Yes.
And controlling, sometimes it might be, I'm going to do this for a certain amount of time, and then remove and do what I need to nurture myself as well.
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot of energy output that is put in on some of these big gatherings. And especially in neurodivergent folks, like we just, we tend to not like noise. We don't like the chaos, the busyness, and a lot of holidays embrace those things. And so again, what other people will look at and say, "Oh, this is fun and wonderful," we're losing fingernails in the process, and stemming in the background and trying to do things like that. So again, a lot of times it's communicating what we can do and what we need.
Mm.
And that idea of zeroing in on one person is great. It holds that connection there.
Mm. And I like what you said, Matthew, too, about kind of communicating what we need. I think there's this like unmet expectation, like silent expectations. And of course we're disappointed, especially if we don't even like verbalize what they are. How can anyone possibly meet them? I know that for many years, like I was like lead chef on the family meal for the holidays, and that was very overwhelming and tiring. And I finally said, I do not want to cook every single dish and side dish. Like, please help me. And people stepped in and helped. Actually, my brother ended up taking over like major cooking, and I was so grateful. And it's like, why didn't I just say something earlier? Why did I do it
Mm-hmm.
resentful? That's not healthy for me or anyone else.
My lens is always couples, and I was thinking about that idea of, um, so a couple of ideas. The idea of how often a couple will have an expectation and they'll wait until their partner doesn't meet it, and then they'll be mad at it.
Oh, yes.
And
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
so,
yes.
like, just letting this person fail, and
Mm-hmm.
somehow that feels safer than just asking them for that help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think that's fear of rejection, like fear that the other person won't do it?
I think there's lots of explanations. One of them is fear that the other person won't step into that space and fill it. But sometimes we don't even stop and say, what do I really need from this situation? So then we can't communicate it to other people.
Yeah, so we don't even know what we need ourselves sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very true with gift giving too. Like, what is the expectation here? Am I supposed to give everyone a gift of how much value? And then if it's not talked about, it's even more uncomfortable. And so setting that expectation out loud, hey, let's just do white elephant, one person only, or let's do none. Like this year, I'm having that with family. No gifts. Like, let's just enjoy the time off. Like, let's not do the gifts. And that feels really good. And, perhaps in other years, we would not have had the courage or even wanted to do that. So it's okay to change it up a little.
And that maybe there's that benefit of the grief process in here is when grief happens, it shakes up the dynamic and the status quo. And hopefully we don't wait till that point. Hopefully we're able to catch it beforehand. But even afterwards, a lot of times it's okay to say, which one of these traditions do we want to hold on to?
Mm.
Um, this dish was a fabulous one to bring every year, but you know what? Nobody liked it. The people that ate it did so out of obligation to make them not feel bad. Let's not, I'm not that I'm calling that out as a personal thing, deviled eggs. But like it's okay to bring these things up and question and say, hey, is this something we want to continue,
So
or need to?
grief is only one kind of transition
Mm.
because personally I love transitions. They
Mm,
bring everything into question. And a lot of people feel kind of roped into the traditions, and it's really
Mhm.
hard for them to tell a family member with a lot of expectations that they're going to break that transition. But
Mhm.
if you catch one of those natural transitions, then it's much more seamless. It's much easier to do, such
Mhm.
as we just got married. Now I need to navigate this with my spouse's
mm,
family, or we just had kids and traveling is a different thing, or
Mhm.
or we just lost someone. So let's look at what really works. So, like looking for those places where it's natural to have that conversation and then not being afraid to step in and say, oh, yeah, we need to change this. Let's just do it differently.
Yeah, I love that. And that's really good advice too for, I work with a lot of single people, and the holidays bring a whole different set of sort of challenges for them. Like, constantly being asked, there's a great commercial or that girl is asked, so do you have a boyfriend yet? Like ask, those very like it's almost like the holidays give permission to ask uncomfortable personal questions to people. And it's like, having either an answer ready to go, knowing that, Uncle Joe is going to ask you again, why haven't you met someone yet? Or allowing single people kind of the permission. I kind of work with people to think about, if you're an adult, which I work with only adults, and you're single, like you don't have to go to the family thing. Like you get to actually choose. Like you're not actually obligated. Only in your mind are you really obligated. You're not actually, you don't have to go anywhere you don't want to go. And that's the great thing about being a single person on the holidays. You get some freedom. If you want to book a trip, to the Bahamas or go on a cruise, like you could do that. And like helping them expand their mind that it doesn't have to be just because you're single, you don't have to wait until you're married to have an excuse not to spend the holiday with your family. That doesn't have to be your life transition marker. It can be whenever you want it to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yep.
It does. And we all have agency. We all
Yeah.
have the ability to say, this is what my boundary is, or even this is my new boundary. This is the new thing that
Mm-hmm.
I've decided is best for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Coming from the child of divorced parents, was, chaotic enough because we always had two of every holiday and had to try to keep everything balanced and equal, had that expectation there. Getting married added a third family in there, which then complicated, because then do we split our time in thirds? Do we split it in, you know,
Mm-hmm.
one half and 1/4 and 1/4, because it's technically that. And it just got messy. And there were holidays that tempers would flare, and just realize that nobody was really being honored out of it. And for me, it didn't happen until we had our son, and we realized, oh, we have the agency to say no. And I wish we had done it sooner. I wish we'd really drawn our boundaries a little bit better earlier, but we didn't know better. I mean, sometimes it takes us a little bit to realize that, we are the adults in this situation. And I was finally able to tell mom, like, hey, we'll be there when we get there. It's not going to be first thing in the morning, because you're not going to get us at our best. And if you wait until time is great, your needs are met, maybe not in the 100 way you want, we're doing well, we still make that contact. And
Thank you
things went
for
a lot
bringing
smoother.
Thank you for bringing that element of our childhood experiences into this. Maybe it's just my experience because I've worked with so many people in a mental health scenario, but lots of people had terrible holidays growing up with a parent who was explosive, or a parent who had lots of expectations, and when they failed, they fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
So not everybody comes into the holidays thinking, this is great. This is
Yeah, this is gonna be
magical.
so much fun. Yeah.
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 call,
Yeah.
call those the ghost of Christmas past. I mean, it's like a lot of times those things come back to haunt us, and aren't
Sure.
always fantastic.
Oh yeah, we have some baggage with the holidays.
Hmm.
Yeah, even if we don't acknowledge it because we're thinking about it, sometimes that's stored in our body and in our memory and in the tradition itself. And then we get in the middle of it and we're like, man, why am I so disappointed or upset or walking on eggshells, without being able to pinpoint that maybe that's what you brought to this holiday from the past.
Yeah, which is why I think like a mindfulness or even a meditation practice, just to start becoming aware. Am I responding to what's actually happening, or is my body responding to something previously? Which is hard to do, but
Hmm.
once you start catching it, like, oh, nothing's happening. Nothing's happening right now. It's not a big deal. Just I can relax. I recently did some hypnosis. Y'all, I just want to put this in. And she talked about doing my mental vacation spot and just going to my mental vacation spot anytime I was feeling triggered or stressed out. And I love that. And it's like instant satisfaction. I'm like, oh, I'm in Hawaii. Like it's so great. And so little tools like that can be so helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a very fruitful discussion, hard one for sure. Are there any, takeaways? What are the tips that you all have for our listeners today on this sadness and grief during the holidays?
So when I work with couples, and these strategies would probably work for individuals, but I know that they work fantastic for couples. It's to talk about an event before you get there and talk about what might go wrong. So you're kind of both looking for the signs of that. And setting some boundaries or expectation with your partner so that they know that if certain things happen, it means that something else is going to happen. If a certain thing is said, or there's this kind of an argument, that maybe you're going to leave or you're going to join with each other in the corner and like really support each other. And then also being able to set up some guidelines about like, how are we going to get out of here? What's the expectation about how much time we're going to spend together? And
Mhm.
sometimes that might be, we're going to leave after an hour. That's our plan. But it also could be, at this point, we're going to check in with each other and have just a quiet little sidebar and decide, are we staying? Are we leaving? How much longer are we staying? But really working together as a couple. And then the last piece is to be able to debrief with one another at the end, where you
Mm.
really just talk about what happened and how it felt to you, and maybe even talk about how you're going to handle that the next time the family gets together, whatever that tradition is.
I love that. Very productive.
Yeah, I really like that. I think for me, one of mine is remembering, and those are all great solutions. I think sometimes also realizing sometimes we don't have the solutions.
Mm.
Sometimes we just have our part of it, our key to it. Um, and it might be, Marlene, I appreciate that idea of like, oh, I'm overwhelmed from having to do all the cooking, right? You didn't have to come up with the meal plan for everybody else to, to follow or something like that. You can just lay that out there. And this, it will, your results are going to vary with this. But I think it really shows the lay of the family and the dynamic that's there. If you are able to put that need out there and just say, hey, I'm, whatever that case may be. It might be I'm overwhelmed, or I'm struggling with this year, or, this is what's going on. And essentially it turns into how can you help? Um, and I think a family that has a healthy dynamic or can develop a healthy dynamic will lean into that. If that's not met well, then that's an answer right there to where it's okay to pull back and guard that a little bit.
Mhm.
But you didn't have to come up with all that solution to start with. You just have to bring up and be true to how you feel.
Is the
Yeah.
opposite of tradition flexibility?
Maybe so.
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, we don't think about the holidays
Yeah.
as a time to be flexible, but that's really where the real joy can be, is in reacting to what's happening and changing it to fit the situation. But that is almost totally against the traditions.
Hmm. Well, I mean, that is the opposite, right? I mean, flexibility is inherently opposed to tradition. But I want to echo both of what y'all are saying about this kind of like, um, you may not have the solution, but just expressing more of what you need, even if it's like, I'm just tired of this, or I want to do this. Like, almost want to advocate like selfishness in the holidays, like like not doing the people pleasing thing, because actually, that would be, I think that would result in a whole lot of people not being pleased ultimately, and especially yourself. And like the holidays for me should feel a time of refreshment, like because you're out of work, not additional stress. And it's like then you need a holiday from your holiday. And so, I just want to advocate for especially like people who have freedom to exercise that freedom and think, what do I really need and want this holiday season? Is it time off? Is it time away from family? Is it just a little bit of time with mom and dad? And then I can go do this other thing. Like, what is it? What would make me happy? My inner being happy. And I really do believe that when you do what's really good and healthy for you, it's actually good and healthy for others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I must just throwing the last thing in here is maybe see what weight that tradition has.
Mm.
If it's a lightweight tradition, maybe it's a great thing to keep in there to be flexible. If it's a heavy tradition, maybe it's time to change it. And I have my inner Tevye getting ready to burst out in song here, so we might need to wrap up quickly. Just with traditions. So
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Matthew. So I know all of us have some new offerings and things going on. So Sherry, what do you got going on? Tell us.
Oh, you guys know I'm so excited. I've got a few very exciting things going on. I have just started training to be a sex therapist. And I know that there's a lot of connotations with that, but I am super excited. I think this is going to help the couples that I work with tremendously. So, as a result, I started a new series. It's in my Facebook group that's a date night community. And that's the community itself is designed to help couples connect and build their relationship over time. But the video series I'm doing is what I learned in sex therapy school this week. So it is very much focused on couples who've been together. There's a lot of things I learned that I may not share there. But I think it will be a great opportunity for people to ask questions and hear things that maybe don't get talked about very much.
Nice. Thank you, Sherry. That's exciting.
That's going to
Matthew?
be fun at the holiday table.
Yeah,
Just,
for real, right?
Mom, what'd you do at work today? Well, my mom was an OB nurse for a while, so we had those interesting dinner table conversations. So I'm excited to see what you're doing, Sherry.
My teen
Um,
girls are not very excited for me.
no, I imagine not. So for me, we're putting the finishing touches on a burnout package designed for clergy. So there's a workbook that's on my website at Matthew E. Morgan, and you can jump on there. So I'm rolling with that. Embracing the geek a lot more in 2023 as well. So I'm going to see a lot more of my nerdiness come out, and then just let it flow free and roll through mental health coaching and counseling as well. So I'm very excited to just kind of let that roll.
Excellent, Matthew. That's very exciting as well and definitely needed for clergy. And you can find me at coachmarlena.com. Actually, really excited because I'm rolling out with two new meditation audios, one to help you decrease stress and anxiety and connect with intuition, and another is kind of like a meditation for non-meditators to kind of get people used to it a little bit and get more comfortable. Sherry, I'll
That's
share it with
me.
you. So yeah, reach out to me and I'll let you know when that's fully official and up and running. But also for people who are dating around the holidays, which I know they are, I have an online profile checklist, how to really make a profile that stands out. So you can also get that at coachmarlena.com or just find me on any of the socials.
Yeah,
Anyway,
this is the right timing if you want to have someone for Valentine's Day and it be a
mhm.
real relationship and not like a brand new one. Like this is the right timing.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Thank you, Sherry, for that plug. It certainly is. Now's the time to plant those seeds. So anyway, thank you all for listening. Please like, share, or subscribe if you found this episode helpful. Look back at our previous episodes, especially the holiday dread, since that is sort of what some of you might be experiencing. And we're coming up on a New Year's episode that will be dropping next week, and we're going to be talking about creating the life you want to live. So stay tuned and feel free to comment too on our YouTube or getting a hold of us and see if you want to hear on a certain topic we have not yet touched on, please let us know or have any kind of questions for us. We're happy to answer them. So again, like, share, and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you know when our next episode is coming.